So I am more known for being an energy efficiency expert than sufficiency expert, but actually I ended in energy efficiency because there was no other choice 20 years ago after my PhD work. I mean, even during my PhD work, there was no other choice if you work on reducing the demand. I will take you through why I will try to. I structured my presentation in a way that I try to explain why sufficiency matters in the case of buildings, but you need to keep in mind that sufficiency matters for all sectors of the economy, not just buildings. So this is very specific to buildings and very specific to housing, given the context. Okay, so these are emissions from in the EU formal EU 28 between 1990 and 2018, and we see a decrease of emissions. And then when you decompose these emissions, you see that you try to understand what are the drivers, how these emissions have been reduced. So we see that 34% of emissions were reduced because or thanks to the energy efficiency instrument that we have, and then we have 33% of the decrease of emissions that is due to the decarbonization of the supply, and I just put the decarbonization of the supply under renewable. And then, but something bad happened in the meantime. In the meantime, we have an increase of emissions that was driven by something that does not exist in our policy instrument, which we label as sufficiency. Why do we have this increase? Because during this period, so you see, if we would have, instead of having an increase here, we would have had a decrease. So we would have almost decarbonized our building stock. But it's not what happened in the EU, because during this period, what happened is that we had an increase of the floor area per capita. So it's exactly the same period, but we look at to the floor area per capita. We have an increase everywhere. But importantly is that the highest increases took place in the wealthiest countries, and the countries that we usually see as green countries or leading the transition, etc. Actually, they are not that green when you consider sufficiency requirements. So you see that these countries are the countries that are all above the floor area per capita. In scenarios, we have in the 1.5 degree scenarios, we have two types of scenarios. One group of scenarios aiming to 1.5 degree targets with negative emissions, like for example the IA net zero emission scenario, and then the other set of scenarios are, and there are not that many, without negative emissions. And whatever scenario you take, so the floor area per capita in all these countries that are above is above this line, is above the maximum that is possible to be within the 1.5 degree targets. So this is a real question for us, and we see that countries that are usually perceived or negatively perceived from sustainability perspective, which are Eastern European countries. These countries are either within the threshold or below for some of them. And overall, the floor area per capita, the average floor area per capita today in the EU is, when you take all the EU 27, is 38. So even the EU average is today here. So the EU average is above even scenario which relies on improving technologies like negative emissions. So this is a real problem for us. And the fact that we had these discrepancies between the floor area per capita between the East and the West, or the richest and the less rich countries in the EU, has societal implications. So in the richest countries, we have under-occupation, while in the countries that are below below the human needs, if you want, these countries, we have overcrowding. Both situations have negative societal impacts. So beyond energy issue, beyond decarbonization issue, there are societal implications of living alone in big house. Especially this happens very often for people when their kids leave the home. So they are basically completely alone. And the overcrowding as well has implications, societal implications, like, for example, domestic violence. So both issues link to the well-being that goes far beyond the energy issues. And then, so what sufficiency has to do with that? So sufficiency is a concept that was born in actually the word sufficiency goes back to the Greek civilization. And then using sufficiency for sustainability was introduced by Prince Thomas, a US thinker, and in 2000. But before that, in the 90s, there is one country where sufficiency was developed as a political strategy or philosophy. It's Thailand. Surprisingly, it's not in the West, it's Thailand. So Thailand developed what they call sufficiency economy philosophy, and they implemented part of it when they faced an economic crisis. And then at the EU level, we have, it was introduced to the energy debate by a German researcher, Wolfgang Sachs. And then for some reason, there has been no uptake of sufficiency in Germany. Maybe the German colleagues can find out why exactly. But there has been, the concept has been imported to France, and in French, the word used is based on the Latin word. It's in Latin is sobrietas. In French, we use the word sobriété. And we had French NGO working on the energy transition, which was mainly motivated about getting out of the French energy system, out of nuclear, the phase out of nuclear power plants. So this NGO introduced the sufficiency concept in the French policy debate. And more importantly, they have designed the first energy scenario based on sufficiency, that is driven by sufficiency. And then there has been a lot of work done in France, and that's why today, France is the only country, to my knowledge from my research, where we have sufficiency in the word, at least the word exists, is part of the French 2015 energy transition law. This is good, but it's not enough, because then when you look at all the implementation decrees that we need to implement sufficiency, to introduce sufficiency, do not yet exist, but there are some that are coming in the French legislation. But then it does not exist elsewhere, to my knowledge. And this is from policy perspective. And today in France, most of the politicians, they add the word sobriété or sufficiency in their speeches. Of course, the meaning of sobriété for them varies from one politician to another. There is no common understanding of sobriété, and there is no common understanding because there is no an agreed definition of what sufficiency is. What I did in the last 2 years was to review all the literature that discusses sufficiency. And then I did come up just recently with this definition, where sufficiency policies are all the measures. So these are policy measures, but also daily practices, because usually people mix up sufficiency with behavior. So it's not just behavior, it goes beyond behavior. It's more lifestyle changes, because in lifestyle changes, you have behavior, but you also have the infrastructure that enable this behavior change. But the most important point is that sufficiency avoids the demand. At the first stage, it avoids the demand. This is a big difference with efficiency, which efficiency is about reducing the energy consumption, while sufficiency is about avoiding the demand at the first place for energy, and not just energy, but also materials, land, water, and other natural resources. So today, I think one of the mistakes that was done by this NGO in France called Negawatt was that to look at sufficiency only from energy perspective. But actually, when you look at the broader literature, you find out that it goes beyond energy. And then it needs to be, this principle should be implemented over the life cycle of buildings, appliances, cars, etc. And with the objective, sufficiency does not mean that you lower the level of comfort that you need. However, you don't provide extra, because today in our world, in the Western world, we have extra. It's about our wants and not about our needs. So sufficiency is about the needs, and by contrast to efficiency, which is about want, I think. And then within the planetary boundaries in the case of decarbonization would be the remaining carbon budget. But I think we need to go, I did not put here within the remaining carbon budget, because actually it goes beyond carbon when you consider land, etc. The planetary boundaries would be more what is known in public domain as ecological footprint. So it's more the ecological footprint of each of us. And sufficiency, so by putting a limit, an upper limit and lower limit, sufficiency is a way to allow for the development of the global south. Because today the world has changed, but we are still behaving like if the global south does not exist, which is not the case. So, and it will have real implications for us in the near future because of just the population shift, the birth rate shifts. And then instead of sufficiency is not something that is against efficiency or against renewable or against the technological progress, because we need technological progress and we will continue to need technological progress. Sufficiency should be embedded in the existing framework, which is unfortunately today based only on, if we look at it from decarbonization perspective, based on efficiency and renewables. So all these efficiency and renewables are possible with technologies. Sufficiency are non-technological solutions. They are technical solutions, like for example, you put biking lines instead of highways, but they are not technological. The one difference between sufficiency and efficiency is that sufficiency measures do not consume energy during the use phase. So they need energy during the production phase only, but not in the use phase. While in efficiency, you need energy in both the use and the production phase. And that's why I took this. So this is how it was introduced by Negawatt, and this is how it is introduced in the French energy law. I just labeled this CIR framework. I think it works much better. In the past, I tried to label it. I just used I was calling this the Negawatt framework because originally it was created by them. It was put like that by them, but then it was so much rejected in very violent way by several colleagues. So that's why by putting it as a CIR framework, it looks like it works much better. We'll see. And then when we look at the EU policy instrument, given that sufficiency is missing in all the EU instruments, it is missing. I couldn't find any sufficiency, any measures or any requirement, especially binding requirement in the EU instrument that could be assigned, that could be considered under sufficiency measures. Then I looked, what are these, the measures and the policies that are considered as sufficiency in the literature and that are put in place in some cities or in some municipalities. Then you understand that sufficiency goes beyond energy. And you understand that it goes beyond energy policies. And I think maybe this is one of the reasons why it's not in the energy policies and it's not in the climate mitigation scenarios, because climate mitigation scenarios are energy scenarios in reality. And it's not, there has been no uptake. What it means, including sufficiency in the policy framework, what it means in reality, it means that we will have new stakeholders that we were not used to talk to or to have them involved in designing our climate policies. And I think it would be much better to have more sustainable development policies than climate policies, but currently it's the climate that is taken over all other aspects of sustainability. So in the case of buildings, I tried to find the EU instrument where we could include, and I think we should include sufficiency. So we have this instrument, and one of the requirements is actually to have a cap in the increase of the floor area per capita. And to be able to have that, we already have experience from, for example, Germany and Luxembourg. We have at EU level a land take framework, but it is voluntary, it's not binding. But in Germany and Luxembourg, it is implemented in a binding way. And because it is binding, so it did push municipalities to change, for example, to include requirements to have more multi-family buildings instead of single-family homes. And this is the way you change, this is the way to reduce the floor area per capita. And there is also the taxation issue. So there are today studies from the US showing that by just changing the taxation, and I think from Denmark as well, you can influence the choices of people. And we also need, in addition to the instrument, we also need to have sufficiency in the commission scenarios. So for example, the Fit for 55, I checked it, there is nothing on sufficiency there. It's just continuation of the same business as usual. And we also need, of course, to track progress in sufficiency in the future. That's all for my side.